Hello and welcome Plato community. It's nice to know I'm a friend. That was a great intro. Thank you. Um, I'm Janice Little. I'm SVP of Engineering at Sheer ID, which is an identity marketing platform. Sheer ID allows brands to create gated, personalized offers for students, military, healthcare workers, and other influential consumer communities. With me today is Ryan Safarian, CTO at Carrot.com. And I'm excited to moderate this Q&A about the state of engineering leadership and specifically around transition from remote to hybrid. So welcome.
Uh, really excited to be here. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Plato. Thank you, Lohika team, for asking me back. This is actually my second talk here with this crew. Really excited to be here. Looking forward to this conversation today. I think it's super important.
Awesome. Ryan, can you just kick it off by telling us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, I come by way of New York, if you can't tell by my accent. I was basically born and raised in the startups for most of my career. For those of you who have experienced startup culture in the past, my heart goes out to you. I know how difficult it is. I've been extremely fortunate to get that hands-on experience, taking an idea from a napkin and watching it grow to be a profitable enterprise product. I've been even more fortunate to be in a position to attempt to shape and grow our future leaders of technology. So transparently, that also comes with full-on anxiety that I'm going to mess it all up for all of you one day. But I will continue to try my best. My career has ultimately led me to a brilliant company called IAC, Interactive Corp, where in February of 2020, we actually acquired an amazing mission-driven company in Care.com, where I was installed as the new CTO. Care.com, for those of you who are joining us who are not familiar, is the one-stop shop broker for finding care for all things that you love. We've really helped facilitate families and give them a platform, a trusted and safe platform where they can find the type of care that they need for any of their needs, whether it's housekeeping, pet care, child care, senior care, primarily child care and senior care. Really important mission, really important topic for everybody, especially nowadays, especially in remote worlds and so on and so forth, where we just need a little bit of extra help. We're here for you. Please, check it out if you need any such help.
That's amazing. Very relevant to today's time. So I appreciate that. So I'll just go ahead and launch into a couple questions here, and I encourage all the audience to use the Q&A tab, whichever direction it is for you, just please feel free to get in there, put questions, upvote. That'll help us out. So first question. So the most organizations went through huge cultural changes in 2020. What was 2020 like for your team, and what was your experience like at Care.com?
So first and foremost, let me just fully acknowledge what we've all been going through collectively. To put it bluntly, 2020 was intense. Strictly speaking, however, from a business standpoint, I do believe that 2020 brought on a cultural renaissance for Care.com. Post IAC acquisition, there was a ton of low-hanging fruit. So we walked in the door February of 2020. My first order of business was I need to open the lines of communication amongst engineering. Care.com had multiple business verticals. Okay, so for the most part, historically, those teams were siloed off. It was an imperative to get in there and kind of break those silos down, get everyone off of their islands and onto a main land. We wanted to unify everyone's mindset and culture. We wanted to get away from the disparate teams. And a lot of that all starts with what I call the trust chain. I think I echo back to a book most of you would know, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Much of this is actually riffed off of that. But the trust chain is essentially starting with encouraging vulnerability, or calling back to the last Plato talk that we had, where we need to build an environment where we can be open, we can be honest with one another, we can confidently share strengths and weaknesses, all of the engineers getting into a room together and openly talking about the things that they know, what they don't know, what they're curious about, which then leads us to a debate. I I fully subscribe to letting professional conflict marinate a bit, right? Without any initial trust, we can't have that productive debate. This is the moment where we can hear your thoughts. This is the moment where we're encouraging everyone to speak up. This is the time. The time is now, because, that's the area where we can kind of come together and make a decision, which leads us to the next area in the chain of committing to a vision. Because once that window of debate closes, we have to commit to a plan. And I don't need all of us to agree. I just need all of us to commit so we can start executing. If we're going to run a successful business, we need to have that execution, which leads us to accountability of actions, right? Once we decide on what that plan is and what that vision is, we need to hold each other accountable. That's the contract. That's what's going to drive us to the KPIs or that OKR or that business-driven result. I don't believe businesses can sustain any long-term success without leading with trust. Trust begets debate, begets commitment, begets accountability, so on and so forth, right to some kind of commitment. So we needed to change the culture right off the bat. Getting everyone subscribed to the trust chain was first and foremost. Second thing that we were really focusing in on is getting rid of this service-oriented structure that we had at CARE historically. The team was essentially positioned to be more of a service. I think many people are familiar with that, right? Like, product will hand you a spec, expect X, so we deliver X. I do think, transparently, that's old hat. I think that the environment has changed, the culture has changed. Engineering needs to have a seat at the table. Engineering absolutely needs to be in lockstep with their partner, their product partner. I call it the interrogation test. If I lock my technical executive and my product executive in two separate rooms and I ask them the same exact question, I expect very, very similar answers. They should be in lockstep with one another. Engineering is living and breathing the code every single day. So my question is always, who's better prepared to understand your opportunities, whatever challenges are ahead? That's why I believe engineering needs to have as much ownership of the deliverables as anyone else. You need to fully understand the metrics. What are we trying to drive? I always see motivation and ownership explode when engineering understands the why of something. So trust chain was the first thing that we changed. Obliterating the service-oriented architecture was the second thing we changed. The third thing that we tried to tackle was unifying some kind of criteria for quality. We need to establish standards. We needed to say, hey, this is no longer a quantity play. It's no longer just push, push, push. We need to understand what it is that we're doing. We need to force best practices across the board, whether it's test-driven development, code coverage. I'm never going to be the one to subscribe and say we need 85% code coverage. I want the team to come together and subscribe to something and commit to something and really hold each other accountable to it. Again, echoing back to the trust chain. Holding everyone responsible for design principles, their commits, their PR, CI/CD, feature flags, testing, experimentation. Getting a level set of quality was and is still a living, breathing action, right? That's a working model. We all have to keep that momentum going because it's very easy to slip back. So those three things, all in all, I think it was a lot to take on, especially in 2020, especially all at once. I could tell you, and probably much of my engineering team could tell you, I probably didn't make a lot of friends early on, but I believe that those changes are paying off major, major dividends right now.
That's amazing. And just when I think about 2020 and, it's fascinating. That story is so fascinating in so many ways, just because of the context of like M&A in 2020, for big tech and, and health. I mean, it's just amazing when you already have all of these, at home work challenges, morale challenges, and then to be asked to come and be that person that's building the bridges that you need for a successful acquisition. That is truly a formidable task. So congrats to you on making your way through that.
Well, I think we're still making our way through that. Like, let me just be, I don't want to sell anyone, bells and whistles here.
Yeah.
This is an active fight, right? Every single day we need to keep coming back to it. We need to keep circling back to our cultural imperatives and say, right, hey, look, this is what we all stand by.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the remote work. For you, what was the biggest benefit as well as the biggest challenge?
I think we I think a lot of us already know what the benefits are, right? We've experienced it for like 18 months. So let me at least first dive into the challenges. I think that's a strong topic to really land here. Some of the challenges I observed first and foremost is communication. Communication was a straight disaster for an org of care.com size, right? We were talking about like 250, 300 engineers, something along those lines. Um, we were all defaulting to like a normal level of communication. What do I mean by that? Is that, you know, still still relying on those intangibles, those hallway conversations, those over the desk conversations, those all went away. So much information and detail was getting lost in transit. Now, there is something that was funny that I observed. There is a information superhighway that exists, whether it's over virtual rooms or chat, whatever, but that's for like rumors only. Okay. So if I whisper a rumor and say, hey, did you know such and such did XYZ? That spreads all the way out and I'm getting pinged left and right. Hey, what do you mean by this? Blah, blah, blah. There is there's a super highway for information. It does exist. But for some reason, messages, directives, initiatives, it would take weeks before that message makes it out to the tips. So we all needed to recalibrate. I brought on all of my executives in a room and I said, hey, what do we need to do here? How do we change this? And we all kind of we all defaulted back and would say that, hey, look, we are still communicating the same way we used to communicate. Like, hey, we would just send a message out and we would never check back in, or we would just assume that everyone would know. So now we just decided to flip the script. We went over to an extreme and overly verbose level of communication until we all got on the same page. And this is still happening today. We all make sure that, hey, we're going to repeat the message as many times as we absolutely need to make sure it makes its way out to the tips. So communication was the first major hurdle to get across. There was a second hurdle that I started to observe, which was I had it myself, and I don't want to assume anything, but I'm assuming, like that other people experiences this as well, is there's a toxic inner monologue that ends up happening, right? I think that's an artifact of the broken communication, where our mind tries to piece together inaccurate or impartial data just to come up with some kind of conclusion, right? We are engineers by nature. We're trying to solve problems. Our minds are very analytical. We're always trying to put the pieces together. If we do not have all the information, or we're making incorrect assumptions about something, we can definitely fall into this quicksand of, misunderstanding, fear, anger, anxiety, doubt, whatever have you. We literally have to train ourselves. This is an active exercise. We have to train ourselves to stop, pull up for air, go and get clarity. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to go and say, hey, look, I really didn't understand this. Could you please come back and, just repeat it again or say it a different way? Okay. You'll anybody who suffers from this toxic inner monologue, please stop yourself, pull yourself out, go get that clarity. It is super important to move anything forward. One of the other things that we observed was just the broken routine, right? There was a lot of constant hands-on keys. I think a lot of us lost our daily routines in 2020, like wake up or whatever, like brush your teeth, shower, exercise, whatever have you, whatever. We lost a lot of that routine early on. It took us a little while, I think, to get back into that groove. Some of the engineers that I know personally are introverted by nature. So they feel a lot more comfortable being kind of closed off in a room and just hands-on keys. That, I think, is also toxic, right? You can go hours without a break, without any kind of interaction, without coming up for air, just walking away from a problem, and you get sucked in and you keep kind of going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. That broken routine, I think, was another major hurdle that all of us needed to learn individually and as a group how to get over. Another thing that a friend of mine actually pointed out was around the no commute or the reset. I didn't realize this. It took a conversation to finally realize this. But my commute to the city would be about 45 minutes to an hour. That commute was my chance to essentially disconnect, because as soon as I got home to my family, I was ready and engaged to be with them. But when I was home, I would just walk out the door and I would be immediately there with them while my mind was still at work. So I didn't have that moment to just kind of disconnect. I think that was super important. And, that's something that we're trying to communicate out to the teams and say, hey, look, before you walk out the door and get ready for the rest of your life, find a way to just unplug, disconnect, whether it's playing chess, whether it's taking 5 minutes to watch a YouTube clip or catch up on the news, do something to just unplug for a moment. And then some of the other challenges were around, again, like I said, isolation, mental health, right? Just coming up for air, just having a conversation with people. One of the biggest things for engineering and growth was we did see a massive loss of opportunity for junior engineers. I started to see our hiring trends be more tilted towards senior engineering, principal engineering, so on and so forth. But there's a ton of associate engineers, junior engineers that are begging for positions. And they're like, hey, how am I ever going to get any experience if nobody's bringing me on board? Well, I think that the remote work went against them a little bit, to be totally honest and transparent here in the spirit of transparency again. I feel that without that face-to-face, without those off-the-desk conversations, without those hallway conversations, I felt that was a major challenge for junior engineers. And we still need to figure out how are we going to get through that. And I think by the over-communication, by being able to latch on to a senior engineer as a onboarding buddy, all of these little tips and tricks that we're bringing on right now, we're trying to install, I think those are the things that are helping us get over some of those humps. So those were the challenges. I think some of the benefits, if I could just quickly, I'll just mention a few of them. I think we all know them. Better flexibility on hours, right? You have ownership over what you're doing with your life. I empower you to do that. I'm here to trust. I'm going to lead with trust. And I'm going to say that I trust that you're going to do your job. It's for you to prove me otherwise, right? Like I will check in on you. I'll make sure I'll monitor your progress and your status. But I'm going to lead with trust here. I'm going to say, hey, you do you. Right? You go out there. If you have a family life, you have whatever else outside of work life, I respect that. You manage your hours, you be flexible as long as you get the job done. I think that it made life a lot easier to adjust for life events, right? Like my mainline water tap had a pinhole in it and I had a flood in the basement. I get that. Go take care of it. Go call the plumber. There was a lot more efficiencies and productivity gains. A lot more overhead that we didn't have to pay for in office expenses and so on and so forth. There was a lot of inefficiencies that were exposed. I think that's an important one as well to mention, is that, once we had the breakdown in communication, we started to see where the inefficiencies lived. That's something that we were able to easily kind of identify, point it out, and try to rectify. It's an iterative process. Let's try something. Let's try to fix it. And then it really got us into more focused meetings. Right? I think we've all experienced the meetings without agendas, meetings that didn't have action items at the end of it, meetings just to prepare for another meeting. We just wanted to have more focused meetings. Hey, what is it that we're talking about? Give us the agenda ahead of time, and we're walking out of here with some kind of agenda or action item. We are appointing someone as secretary to at least document the minutes, and we'll repeat back and whatever. We'll have some kind of someone take charge of the action items moving forward. So challenges, benefits of it. I think we all know them. I think that, a lot of the issues that I've talked about as far as the challenges are concerned, again, that's an active fight. We still have to figure out how do we overcome a lot of these things, because it's a personal issue as well as a team growth issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're in the same fight as well, and we'll continue to be for quite some time. I think a lot of people are, same with us. We saw those metrics, productivity metrics look great, but it's the communication, the burnout, some of those intangible things. Any particular thing you've really done to keep your finger on the pulse of team morale?
Yeah, there was a few things that we tried. And stop me if you heard these before. But first and foremost, we did try to stay human. Okay. We wanted to leave time. We wanted to see how people were doing, ad hoc conversations. Hey, whatever, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. You have 5 minutes? Or in the waiting room in meetings as people are coming in, you take a moment and you talk to somebody. Want to make sure that you still stay human, right? Like we can't just be all business all the time. That's just such a morale killer. We do have to connect in some way. As far as morale was concerned, we asked, right? Listen and label the concerns. I think that repeating issues back to people, seeing if you have the right of it, is very important. I think that's the first critical step. If if you come to me and you start telling me, hey, Ryan, I have an issue with XYZ, and I'm immediately just going into solve mode for you, I don't think that helps you. I think that ultimately you have to first label the concern. I got to tell you, hey, let me repeat this back to you. Let me see if I understand what you're saying. Once I have the right of it, then let's kind of go into solve mode together to see what's going on. So listening, labeling concerns, I think is critical for morale. I think actually throwing out surveys is tremendous, especially again in orgs the size of like care.com, something as, like MPS style anonymous surveys where we could throw things out where it's, hey, what are we doing well? What do we need to be doing better? How do we fix it? Always ask, hey, what is your feedback? How do we fix some of these things that you think are broken? And then what we do is we collect, we analyze, and then we come forward to communicate the next steps in a start, stop, continue method, right? It's kind of like a retrospective. This is what we're going to start doing based on your feedback. This is what we're going to stop doing based on your feedback. This is what we're going to continue doing based on your feedback. I think that any retrospective, it doesn't mean anything without any type of after action to it. So please feel free, throw an anonymous survey out there if the team feels a little skittish about getting there, if they're not clear and transparent enough, if they're not comfortable expressing themselves yet. So that's another way to check morale. I think from a leadership perspective, we all have to flex to the styles. There's a lot of different communication styles out there. I think it's important we have to gauge in an individual style when we are communicating with them. We have to essentially try to label what's the best way to communicate with them. And if we don't get it, and if there's something that's ambiguous, I think it's totally okay to ask and say, hey, Tom, what's the best way to deliver feedback to you, right? And work on that with them, right? Try to understand what is the best way to understand them, what is the best way to deliver that feedback to them, because that's how you can now use some trusted frameworks out there to drive results. There's some frameworks like SBI, situation, behavior, and impact, or GROW, goal, reality, options, and way forward. These frameworks are tried and true. They work, team, right? Like we can go out there, and if there's someone who has an issue and they can't seem to be getting out of their way, you walk them through what the situation is, their behavior based on that situation, and what their behavior and what's the impact on what they've done. I think that's a very crystal clear way of giving direct and honest feedback without without making it too personal to them, without challenging their personality, right? Like it detaches that and it makes it a very data-driven conversation. Same thing where if someone's just trying to be better or like enhance their career, we can use GROW. You talk them over and say, hey, what's the goal here? You walk them through what the reality of the situation is. Here's your profile today. Here's the reality or here's the goal of the profile you want to be. Here's the reality of the profile you are today. What's that gap analysis? What's the options for you to get there? And have them dictate what the way forward is, right? It's super important to get everyone else's buy-in. What better way to get the buy-in than to have them dictate that, right? Also with morale, I am kind of going on a little long here, but also on morale, I think it's super important to rope in product and other counterparts, right? Just so you can get their perspective. Get everybody into a room and say, hey, Ange, what is the culture like from a scale of 1 to 10, right? How's everyone feeling today? What's going on from a business perspective? Do they feel like they're making an impact? Do they feel like they're moving things forward? How do they feel as far as work-life balance, blah, blah, blah. Getting the product counterpart to come give their perspective or their observation on engineering, I think is also super important. We're a team. We're in this together. We don't want this disjointed eng versus product versus design versus business, right? We all want to be there. And I think it's a holistic exercise, getting everyone in a room to kind of talk through it together, getting their observations. I think it's going to uncover a lot of things. Also, skip level meetings is super important, right? So at certain C levels, I think it's absolutely imperative to get back down to the floor, right? Get boots on the ground, essentially get a very real perspective on what's going on. Do not just make the assumptions. Do not just take, your executives' I guess perspective on things. I think it's important for you to go in there and kind of select and get back down and talk to some of the skip levels, have them define things for you, like what does a high performing team look like to you, right? And again, let's profile it together. Let's go through the goal. Let's go through the reality of the situation. What are the way forwards? What are the options? Do that gap analysis on the profiles. Have them define these things for you. That way they can have that buy-in. They can push this thing forward together. All of these things together, I think, all just culminate to an increase in morale, gets everyone involved, gets everyone feeling as if they are part of the mission and they are the ones that are helping to drive the results as well. It is not a prescriptive effort from that point.
That's great. Yeah, I love something you said really early on there, Strux. Like we asked, that's really important. And I think so many people in like designing a system sort of forget that part. I'm also a huge survey nerd. So I love that, especially if you can have a little data from like before the pandemic set in. It's nice to have some benchmarks there. And
Yeah.
just I would encourage everybody to continue that, through reentry as well. Okay, well, we're about halfway here, so I did want to just jump into some, Q&A questions. And this is, heavily. I'm looking here. It's heavily also what I wanted to know. But just starting from the top, it says, since we're now scattered all over the country and working mostly effectively as a remote org, what are some ways to reintroduce the office back into the culture? Um,
Awesome.
yeah, is a headquarters office even necessary now? So,
So let me answer that in a few different ways. I think that, we talk about the office culture, what that is. Now, is an office absolutely necessary? From an engineering standpoint, I think it depends on where you stand as a team, right? I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to anything. I don't think it's a yes or a no. What I think is it needs to be more of a collective understanding. But before you even get to that point, there is an understanding of what your organization structure looks like. And I think that's going to be super important. You have to get back down to the basics first and foremost. Understanding what your roles and responsibilities are for each level of the team. In my case, I was inheriting a team that was a mashup of different titles. So I created like an abstraction layer. I have technical executives, I have tech team managers, I got delivery leads, I got ICs, I have architects. Every single person knows what their reporting structure looks like. Everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are. I think that from there, you start building out what your org structure ends up looking like. And again, this all goes back down to the basics, where on our side of the house, we went back to delivery teams. This is something where we said, well, all right, let's have a smaller delivery team where we can fail fast, kind of mature faster. I think that the smaller delivery teams lessens the lines of communications. I think it results in less confusion. I think it increases the engineering engagement. There is a contribution to overall effectiveness, and it also means that if something breaks, we suffer much less thrash on the change, because now we can go in there and fix it much faster. We can pick ourselves up much faster. I do think that the smaller teams also are like a breeding ground for like those cultural imperatives. It's much less intimidating to be open, transparent, and vulnerable in front of 4 or 5 peers versus the entire organization at once. Let your delivery team kind of be that environment, train that emotion up. I also think that they lead to stronger outcomes for innovation when you have these smaller teams, and you can kind of break things out. You can let your voice be heard. You can kind of debate in a safe and confident environment. You can walk away with thought out decisions, allow yourself a lot more room for creativity and innovation. Overall, there's a greater sense of ownership on what ends up happening. And then from there, we built out more of a hub and spoke model where, we think that, with any organization, there's care and feeding that's necessary. If you have legacy applications or new applications, we want to limit distractions to accelerate your roadmaps. You want to also have some kind of hardened infrastructure so you can have rapid growth if necessary. All these things kind of come together as part of the basics. It's like, hey, do we understand our roles? Do we understand where our reporting lines are? Do we have crystal clear clarity on those things? The other areas for clarity, and this is all a precursor to even getting back into the office, in my opinion, is, hey, we need to have clear company direction. What's our mission? what is the company North Star here? What is it that we're all trying to accomplish? How do those North Stars map to our OKRs at the end of the day? How do we map projects on the roadmap back to those OKRs? And then finally, how do we map the tasks up to the projects? If we can't get that overall company culture or that company mission locked in, it's going to be really difficult for us to continue a world either outside the office or even back in the office. We've all been so far apart for so long. I think we just got to really just focus back to the basics, come back in. And if we are going to reintroduce office, I think there's a few ways where we can reintroduce that. I think like having your IT support or people ops to kind of weigh in on a lot of these things. Like at care.com, we have a magnificent DevOps, IT ops, and people ops team. Really, really solid fundamentals. And they come back to us with an amazing ramp. It's saying that, hey, great, if we're going to come back into the offices, first and foremost, we're going to set things up like, especially for engineering, we're going to continue to be remote neutral for now, but we are going to set up every office space with hotel desks. Those hotel desks come with their peripherals and so on and so forth. And we have like a workplace management tool. I think it's called Robin, where it's make available for bookings, where engineers can actually book themselves, get back into the office. And we always have to be data driven, mind you. Obviously, like there's some changes out there into data, which we're kind of rolling back some of these initiatives that we wanted to move forward. We thought that the world was going to be fully opening up, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of a backslide there. But and giving everyone the opportunity to book, to get in there, to come back into the office if they feel like it's necessary to come back in. We even set up the same look and feel where we do a multicam setup in conference rooms. It focuses in on the individuals. That way the people that are sitting remote don't feel a way about it, right? We are also doing like non-multicam setups where everyone still joins video chats from their machines. And then we coordinate gatherings, we get everybody together. So it's a combined effort ultimately, but I do absolutely think that it's fundamental to get back down to the basics before you even can walk back into the office. Like you need to get your culture tight, you need to get your reporting structure tight, you need to get the roles and responsibilities tight, your company's mission statement, all of that, I think absolutely tight.
That's amazing advice. I love your focus on the organizational health piece there, right? And like not only creating the clarity, but just reinforcing it at every level, right? So that people know, okay, like it's not about whether I'm here or there. It's just like, first of all, are we all rowing in the same direction? Is everybody understand how they're moving the needle? I also love that you brought up Robin because that's a hot tip. If anyone's not doing that, understand how to have hotel desks and be able to, distance people even within the office. It's the same, Sheer ID also transitioned to like we call it work where you work best through
Nice.
2021. And, like most companies and, what you're describing, the Delta variant, especially has caused us to kind of rethink our strategies for handling reentry. And we are, like you said, following the data, we're continuously like adjusting our policies and best practices, with what we're seeing in like local guidance as well as in the market. And, it's okay to project, a little bit of that ambiguity as we talked about, saying, okay, this is what that's actually an attribute that you should be bragging about as your HR team is like, we've got a really flexible, and responsive HR team that's going to make sure that we're doing what's safest for our employees and our communities and our families. Right. So I think those are all really great points. I wanted to mention too, I was, just in doing this, I looked in, Life Labs has like an amazing like hybrid readiness audit tool that everybody can kind of check out. And, just to kind of speak towards, it's, as you said, it's all about like, we can't tell you whether or not you should have a headquarters or not, right? It comes back to your company values and what you need, as an organization. But,
Honestly, I mean, like, what difference would it make if you're in an office or not if the business is collapsing on itself, right? Like, if people
Right.
don't know what they're doing, if people don't know who they're reporting to, if people don't know exactly what their tasks are driving as far as business initiatives, what's the point, right? Like, does it really matter if you're sitting in an office or not? Like, I think it all just comes down back down to the fundamentals. Get back down to those basics. Everyone get on the same page. Then we can actually talk about, does it even matter if we need to be sitting face to face in an office or not, right? Go get over those challenges and those hurdles of communication. Like, if you seriously have not been able to figure out the communication problem, that's okay. I'm still facing that problem as well. It's okay to have these problems.
Yeah.
Let's just iterate on it, give it a shot, put a plan out there, see if it works, get the feedback. You have to have that feedback loop. Super, super critical, team. We got to make sure that we're asking people exactly what it is that they feel is important. We have to make sure that we're asking people, hey, what's working, what's not working? Let's iterate on the plan. Then we can figure out together, like, okay, well, what are the gaps that we still need to close? Is an office important for us or not? Right. So exactly, Janice, to your point, like, we're not going to be the ones that prescribe to you go back into the office or not. Like, that's a team effort. You all need to kind of come together on that, but really land your fundamentals first.
And you're reminding me of one thing as well. As leaders, we can all do these like super intellectual plans, right? We'll have a plan, and here's our comm strategy, and we're going to paint the picture of what it'll all be like to come back in the office, and that's going to be great. um, you know but just kind of want to remind everybody that, like, on that very individual level, you may need to flip the script completely, and I actually, the table group, which is the same person you're talking about, the five dysfunctions of a team, same group. They have a podcast called Reentry Sucks. And I would totally recommend that. It's a totally worthwhile listen for anybody who'll be guiding teams back through reentry. And the reason it's interesting is not because they're saying, it's not a commentary on like going back to work, in a negative light, but they were just basically saying when you get used to anything, right? It's a transition to go back. And they were kind of like likening it to like people getting out of prison or like coming back from wartime, or we know it's really hard to transition back into society.
Yeah.
And so just keep that in mind. It's not about whether the change is necessarily good or bad, but just you're kind of reminding me that, like, some people are going to be surprised at their sense of loss, and some people are going to feel that, and that sense of loss is going to be right away, right? Like for me, I'm going to be missing my family and my husband and my kids and my pets that I get to see all day, so just a kind of a reminder, as a leader, to your point, like your reaction can't be like, oh, I'm a problem solver, I'm just going to solve that for you, right?
That's
Like,
right. That's
you
right.
just kind of need to feel the feels, and it's not intellectual, it's emotional. So we may, even if you're mandating, okay, we all need to be back in the office, just reminding people that, okay, for the first month or the first couple weeks, like, it may be kind of horrible with, if your kids are going back to school, or you're going through this transition, you may be like exhausted,
That's
after we've all been sitting at home. So I just kind of want to remind everybody that, like, the good part comes like after that, and maybe you might have to talk a few people through, like you said, what did you say, label it and identify, help them sort of like navigate that loss.
That's right. That's right. I mean, like, I'm dreading the fact of like dreading and like also thinking it over and saying, oh man, like I talked about that commute and how it was my unplug, but I'm like, oh, do I really want to sit in a train again? And like be just like constantly bumping elbows with people and be stuck standing because it's overcrowded and I don't have a seat. And I'm like just thinking through all those things. And I'm like, oh, I'm not even there yet, and I'm already getting sketchy about it.
Right. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, question for Ryan. If you work with any external engineering partners, how, if at all, did the pandemic change the way you collaborate with them?
Oh, awesome question. So yeah, we work with a lot of external partners, right? Lohika being one of them. Actually, we have a heavy footprint in Ukraine with Lohika. So what we did was, I think that being remote, the market totally just exploded, right? We're kind of experiencing right now. I think that I think the market value has shot up. I think that all the engineers that are here today listening, or the engineering leaders, I think you'll all agree that there is a premium price point for talent. And I think that's all good. I think this is, the market is dictating what we need. We've become a remote neutral shop where we can hire from anywhere. I don't have to just hire in Austin or DC or New York or San Fran anymore. I can hire anywhere. Like Colorado is an awesome market. Atlanta is an amazing market. Detroit, there's an amazing market. And then we start looking offshore, right, or overseas, where we could say, all right, well, what other markets are out there that we can kind of tap into? And it actually forced us to think, because if we're stuck in a very highly competitive landscape, for me, my biggest thing was, okay, well, great. Let me see, can I get comparable talent somewhere else where I don't actually have to fight so hard, right? So I looked in areas like Mexico. I looked in areas like Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, Pakistan, Ukraine, Bulgaria, so on and so forth, Romania, Slovakia. We've literally has started to expand out, go across the globe. We are completely open to this, because I think that all this is doing, those cultural imperatives that I talked about before, forcing us into a new communication style. What I think it's doing is now allowing us a much better view and perspective on what it's like to work with remote teams, right, or offshore teams, with small caveat of cultural differences, right? I think that that's something that now gets a even bigger highlight. If anything, it gets a much bigger spotlight, because we need to acknowledge and we need to understand those cultural differences. If I'm working with a team in India, or if I'm working with a team in Pakistan or Ukraine or something like that, there's cultural differences there for sure, right? And I need to flex to the style of communication again. But as long as you have prepared yourself for that remote world, that over communication, that flexing to styles, the morale checks that we talked about, asking people for their feedback, getting that feedback loop, I think now you have absolutely set yourself up for success for that offshore integration or staff augmentation.
Yeah, that's great. We also, it was no doubt for us as well a struggle to do, to maintain relationships with vendors, during the pandemic as well. Like we used to send folks to Guadalajara and they'd come here, and so I totally identify with what you're saying. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's see. The next one we have is, how do you handle reopening different geographies which are in different phases of reopening, and vaccination rates? Fairness balanced with flexibility.
So what we're doing, I'll be able to communicate as much as my people ops team would let me. Let me just put it that way. Again, we have to absolutely follow the data. I can't stress it enough. Like, you do not go rogue, people, right? Like, follow the data, follow the information that's out there and available to you. I know it's a constant change, and I know it's a struggle. At one point they're like, wear masks, and then they're saying don't wear masks, whatever. The data is constantly changing. We have to follow the data. We have to follow, at least trust the people that are in, like trying to guide us in the right direction here. We have to kind of work with those teams. IAC, the parent company for care.com, does an amazing job of this, right? They have a COVID task force. They're sitting there day by day, like understanding exactly the nuances and some of the deltas and the changes, so on and so forth. No pun intended with Delta. But, we also at care.com have multiple geographies, right? We have our main office hub, which we call them hubs. Our main office is down in Austin. We have a hub over in San Francisco. We have a hub over in Berlin. We have a hub opening up in Boston area. Again, there's all these little hubs that we have, and we have to kind of follow what we have to work in hand with the state and local registration and the guidelines. We have to have a strong people ops team putting together that COVID task force to put those rules in place, right? I'm not going to opine on whether or not you need to be vaccinated to be in the office or not. That's not my position to do that. I am going to trust the experts to do that, right? Whatever the data is dictating to us, we will kind of follow along there. So everybody is going to have different reopening schedules, different kind of rates, again, based on the data, if that helps.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, if you feel like this is on you and the engineering team, to solve that, it might be, your cue to just reach out to your HR department and really get trusted partners there who are following this and experts at it, and they're looking at this all day long.
Yeah, I mean, Archana, if I'm saying your name correctly, like if you're in a position and if you're in engineering or engineering leadership and they're asking you to do this, raise your hand and say, "Look, this is not my wheelhouse," right? Like I am here to help you and I'll give you the data. Maybe a good way to start is by again surveying your team and say, "What is the likelihood that you feel comfortable coming back into the office? What are the guidelines around coming back into the office that you are comfortable with? Is it social distancing, mask wearing, blah 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 blah?" You can collect in data yourself. You can do like an internal survey to try to figure some of that stuff out. Bring that data over to your people ops or to leadership or whoever and say, hey, this is the information that I know. You tell me where you want to go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And also some of those points you mentioned earlier, like just, making things equitable by like, having good Zoom setups and everybody's joining remotely, so that there is that sort of fairness and just basic human, being considerate of others. Is good. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's our next one. I feel like this gets asked no matter what the topic. Get building trust is a hard endeavor, while breaking it can go very fast. What advice would you have to recover trust between tech teams and business? Hard
Execution.
one.
It's all about execution and delivery. Execute and deliver. That is going to build trust. I use this metaphor, I guess it is. I'm terrible with this stuff, but I use this all the time. When a new quarterback, excuse me for any international folk here, but when in American football, when a new quarterback comes into the game, first thing that you want to do is build up their confidence. How do you do that? You throw these little button hook passes. It means that somebody is running a couple yards out and just turning around and catch a very simple pitch and catch. Build that trust. Like get some wins. Get into that habit of execution. Get into that habit of delivery. Get into that habit of monitoring, making sure your observability is tight. Make sure that you are all on top of what are the metrics that need to be moving. Ask the questions, why are we doing this thing? What are the metrics that I need to be concerned about? What are the metrics that I need to be monitoring constantly? Get ahead of the problem. Go out there and try to figure out, well, what is it that we're doing today that has broken the trust? What does that profile look like? The new profile, let's use grow model, right? Perfect example. Mayasa, excuse me if I'm butchering the names, but use the grow model, okay? What is the goal here? We all want to have that trust. What is the reality? Right now that trust is broken. What's the options that we have here? Great. Engineering needs to do what? How can engineering recover your trust? Do we need to, I don't know, do we need to move faster? Do we need to be a little bit more cerebral with our approaches? Are we coding ourselves into a corner? Do we not have the proper safety guards and guardrails? Do we not have a hardened infrastructure? What is it that's breaking things apart, that's ruining the trust, that's stopping you from executing effectively and efficiently? It's all about execution and driving business value. I have a tech exec on my team. I love some of the phrases that he comes up with, and he says that building technology just for the sake of building technology is a hobby. If you're building technology that's driving business value, that's actually just something that's moving the needle. That's what technology is supposed to be. I love the fact that he says that, and I'm going to steal that from him one day, but I'll give him credit for it, a guy named Peter Ola. But ultimately, understand what it is that's driving value for your business. Don't don't go rogue and just build technology for the sake of building technology. Figure out what the profile is, figure out what the way forward is there.
I love it. Yeah, if you have trust, you have healthy conflict, and you're all trying to accomplish the same goal, that's a recipe for success.
Right.
Love
That's
it.
right. Trust is so paramount. And we're not saying like it's all around vulnerability and trust and being able to go to someone and have an honest conversation with them about this, right? You don't make it personal. Keep it professional, obviously, right? First and foremost. And it's okay to be emotional about things. It's okay to show your emotion. Like I'm an excitable cat, right? Like if somebody says something that's just, crazy to me, I'll be like, oh man, what are you talking about? Right? Like it happens and I got to reel myself in a little bit. I'm human. I have these flaws, but it's okay to be emotional about this stuff, but just don't make it personal. And, like, let's just have an honest debate about it. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. I always thought whiskey was the key to like a perfect
Oh,
product
yes.
engineering
Yeah.
relationship, but we can't do that right now. So yeah, it's good to have these other these other tips in your back pocket.
The virtual whiskey.
All right. That should wrap it up. This always goes so fast when you're having fun here. Thank you so much, Ryan. This has been a really great experience learning from you here today. Big thank you, of course, always to Plato for bringing us together. Special thanks to Lohika for helping us address such a relevant topic and for bringing us the State of Engineering Leadership 2001. I'm excited to read that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And for all you audience members out there, I hope you all feel just a little bit more equipped and a little bit more confident about your transitions back from remote to hybrid. And I
Listen,
wish all just a wonderful rest of your day.